Hello everybody, this is the Love Yourself Guru and welcome to the Love Yourself TV. Today we're going to be doing a video on getting familiar with the unfamiliar. So let's begin. When you join the Love Yourself movement, life really changes very quickly, God willing, for the better. And the reason why it changes for the better, God willing, is because you start to do two things. Number one, you start to love yourself. And number two, you really start to understand your mind and how it works. And those two things are really a combination of success, God willing. Now, let's go into understanding your mind. So once you love yourself, you'll begin to realize that your mind has like a nature of its own, and you begin to become the observer of the thoughts it throws at you. You're not the thoughts itself. You begin to observe the thoughts and you begin to take which thoughts you want and you begin to let go which thoughts you don't want. You also understand the nature of your mind, and your mind doesn't like the unfamiliar. So anything that's unfamiliar, it's going to play up. Okay? Everything familiar, it will go easy on you. But if you want to do something new, especially something new that's good for you, that's very unfamiliar, you're going to have a bit of a hard time with your mind if you let it. But if you really take control of your mind and you learn how to direct it, you'll know how to calm and nurture your mind. So let me give you an example. Let's say that your familiar is unhappiness, is being unhappy. And then all of a sudden you want to change, God willing, and you want to be happy. You woke up and you read about the Love Yourself movement. You thought, right, you know what? I'm going to love myself. And because I really want to be happy. So your familiar was unhappiness. Okay. That's what your mind was used to, familiar. And then you want to do something, change your state into something that's unfamiliar, which is happiness. Well, your mind is going to give you a really hard time. And every time you try to be happy, it will either take you to the past, regrets of the past, it will scare with the future, it will make you dissatisfied with the present, anything. Your mind will do anything to basically make happiness, which is currently unfamiliar, make it not familiar. It doesn't want it to be familiar. So what do? How do you make the unfamiliar familiar? And by the way, when you really start to love yourself, you're going to have to, what you'll find is there are a lot of familiars, yes, that you want to change. So for instance, unhappiness, maybe not being very healthy, not loving yourself, having a negative perspective on life, negative thought patterns, not taking action to create, God willing, the life that you want. These are all familiars that you'll start to make unfamiliar, and you'll replace them with the opposite, and they, God willing, will become your new familiar. But let's say you have an unfamiliar happiness, and then you want to change it to make it your familiar, right? You want to make happiness, which is unfamiliar, you want to make it familiar. What do? Well, the first thing that you do is you try to get your mind familiar to happiness, because it's not familiar to it now, is it? So you try to make it familiar to happiness. How do you do that? Through words. Words are the most powerful tool words they're just amazing. If you knew the power of words, you would really, really be careful. Every time you actually say a word, or every word you use, you know that it's actually painting and creating your reality, God willing. So how do you get your mind familiar to the unfamiliar? How do you get your mind from unhappiness, yes, which is familiar, to the unfamiliar, which is happiness, and make that unfamiliar familiar, make happiness familiar, is through words. Because words, actually, the words you use create your emotions. Okay, create your emotions, and then the emotions that you have create your behaviors, and your behaviors create your reality. Okay, so for instance, you may be thinking, and how can just a word do that? Well, it can. If, let's say, you're standing in line in the supermarket and then somebody comes and swears at you, that's just a word, and then all of a sudden you get angry, yes, or get angry. So that word has actually changed your emotion, and then it will probably change your behavior. But if the same person came and said, oh, you look beautiful today, God bless you, that will create a different emotion with a different behavior. So words are really powerful, and the words that we use with ourselves are the most powerful words, because we're using them 24 hours, 24 hours a day, we're using those words. So let's go back to this. Sorry if it's a bit complicated, but let's go back to this. Let's say your now is unhappiness, and you want to, change that unhappiness to happiness. What's happening? Because happiness is unfamiliar, your mind is going to give you a hard time. So to make happiness familiar, you're going to start having to use words to actually get your mind used to, the new familiar that you want, which is happiness. So how do you do that? You start using words in your vocabulary, yes, associated with happiness more often. Okay, so let's say, and I've chosen happiness. Let's say if you wanted your new familiar to be healthy, you would choose words related to health. So words related to happiness would be cheerful, content, delighted, glad, joyful, and you would just start using those words more. How are you today? I'm very joyful. I'm very good. Or how are you feeling? Oh, it's a wonderful day. I'm delighted. I'm delighted to see you. Happiness, joy, glad, brightness, laughter, smiling. And you start to include these words in your vocabulary, and then you also write these words around you, like just little post-it notes, and you just write them on the wall. For instance, when you wake up and you brush your teeth in the morning in the bathroom, you could have a post-it, and it could say, I'm going to have a very cheerful day, or a very joyful day, or my life is joyful, or everybody around me is smiling, or I love smiling. You just start using the words, using the words associated with the new familiar that you want. You also write them on the wall, and then you start using your imagination. You start using your imagination with these new words. Okay, what does it look like? Close your eyes. What would it look like for me to be cheerful? What would it look like for me happy? And you would actually imagine yourself taking action and getting yourself in the state of happiness. So for instance, I would imagine what would make me happy. All my family around me, God bless them all my family around me, all the people I love around me, all my family and my friends around me. That would make me, that makes me very happy. And so I would just imagine that, and I'd always put myself in a state of happiness, either through my words, or the words that I'm seeing in my house, or what I'm saying, or through my imagination. And what you'll find is very gradually and slowly, instead of your mind freaking you out with this new reality that you want, this new familiar, you're taming it, you're getting it used to very gradually, this new familiar that it's unfamiliar to, and it will get used to it, and you'll make sure it's get used to it. You'll make sure that if you want your state, your new familiar to be happiness, you'll make sure, God willing, through your thoughts and your words, yes, your words and your actions, you'll make sure that your mind gets used to your new familiar, you get used to your new familiar, God willing, and everybody around you gets used to your new familiar. So I really want you to get a pen and paper down and write down, what is your familiar now? Okay, so what is your familiar now? Is your familiar sadness? Is your familiar happiness? Is your familiar prosperity? Is your familiar lack? Is your familiar well-being and health? Is your familiar wanting the best for others? write down, what are you living? What are your familiars? Yes, the positive ones, kindly keep them, they're working for you. But negative ones, they're always working against you. And start changing every week. Change one familiar to the opposite, which would be unfamiliar. So let's say, for instance, your familiar is living in a state of lack. What do you want to do? You want to go to the unfamiliar at this program, which is prosperity. So you want to change your familiar, which is scarcity mindset, lack, into a prosperity mindset. So you want prosperity mindset to be your new familiar. What do? You start using more prosperous words. You start affirming and writing prosperous words. You start to feel prosperous. You start to imagine prosperous scenarios. Do you get what I'm saying? So basically, look at your familiars, and if they're negative, change them to the opposite. And you really want your familiars, the more you love yourself, and I've written down a list, the more you love yourself, the more you want your familiars to be peaceful, pleasant, loving, gratitude, prosperous, healthy, joyous. These should all be, God willing, spiritual. These should all be, God willing, your familiars. And getting your mind used to these new familiars is just a technique. It's just a technique. You're in control. You're the observer of the mind, and you actually now are when you observe the mind, you can actually control it and tame it and nurture it the way you want, God willing. And let it work for you and not against you. I love you loads. I hope you really enjoyed the video. Kindly click on the subscribe button to the channel and like the video if you liked it, and I will see you in the next video, my lovely.